So it's you want to talk Pride?
It's Pride. And Pride is starting next week here in Halifax on the 14th of July. If you're downtown Halifax, you can certainly visit our office on George Street, and you will see some beautiful Pride decals that are going to be coloring our windows. And we are doing a workshop. We're doing a workshop around home ownership. It's open to everybody. We're very inclusive here. And we're doing it outside on our terrace, weather permitting. And we have a host that's going to be hosting it. And we have a realtor and a lawyer. And I'm going to be sitting on the panel. And it's going to be basically an hour workshop talking about home ownership. Obviously, we'll talk maybe a little bit about the issues and stigma around, inclusivity and home ownership. I think some of the lowest percentage homeownership percentage is from the queer community, and I think that probably needs to change. I think,
why do you think that is?
I think sometimes there's some socioeconomic challenges. I think there's maybe some challenges like building community. I think, in the past, there certainly have been probably some challenges around, not being accepted and stuff like that. And I think even when it comes to lenders, we talked about this a couple years ago. There were a lot of questions from lenders when there was, maybe 2 male borrowers or 2 female borrowers, let alone, someone who may be non-binary or whatever, they asked more additional questions. And it necessarily wasn't maybe about the risk, but maybe it was. I don't know. I think it's just about having the conversation. And I think that when you own a home, you can certainly build better ties in the community. And we've talked about it. Owning a home sometimes is the biggest asset that a family has or a household has. And obviously it's the biggest purchase. It's a big purchase of your life, and the mortgage can be the biggest debt. But I think breaking down some of that stigma and having the information, and information's power. Obviously, that's why we do this show, Todd.
Yeah.
And I think doing things like this workshop is going to be really cool. So if you want to come to the workshop, you can go to our website at teamclinton.ca/radio. There is a link right from the main page that you can go in. There's an Eventbrite. It's a free event. And the event is also on the Pride website, so you can get your tickets there. It's on the 21st. So we'd love for people to come down, our listeners.
Yeah.
Love for you to come down and check out our panel. We'd love to have you. And, we're going to be talking what the perspective is from a lawyer. Maybe there are some different concerns for the queer community around how do you take the title. In Nova Scotia, you can take the title as joint tenants or tenants in common. What's better? So we'll certainly talk a little bit about that and what some of the, legal repercussions can be.
Yeah.
Maybe talk a little bit
it's
about...
It's one of the first of its kind of a mortgage company to be doing something like this.
I think that people do workshops all the time.
Yeah.
And we've actually done a workshop for Pride pre-pandemic. We used to do them at the library.
Yeah.
And we used to have a really good turnout. And some of the people that came to our workshop actually became homeowners, which I think is really, really cool. Obviously some people came through us. Sometimes they'll go to a different mortgage lender. But having the information, I think, is so, so cool. And we're going to have a realtor there. So we're going to talk, about what that looks like and that process. And I'm going to be there to answer anything that you may want to know about mortgage lending. So as you know, I can talk about mortgage lending, obviously for an hour long, many times a year. And I've never met a mic I didn't like.
So when it comes to home ownership, you talk about the biggest purchase, and we know all of that, but you call it the Canadian dream. Mm-hmm. Why do you think, I guess it's self-explanatory in many ways, but what are some of the main reasons why it's such a dream and such a thrill for people to get into a house? You see this all the time.
Well, I think when you own a home, you're kind of controlling your own destiny. So many Canadians rent, whether that's in the queer community or heteronormative community or whatever. So there's so many renters out there. And as you know, right now with rentals, we are at like 1% vacancy. Yeah. So rentals are challenging and the rents are increasing. When you own a home, you can pay down your mortgage. You can improve the property. You can do renovations. You can make it your own. And it's a safe, secure place for you to live. And I think when you own a home, it provides that level of security. And I think that's why Canadians love home ownership so much. We have one of the highest population percentages of homeowners in the developed world. And home ownership is typically more affordable than it is to rent. And I think it's, even with the increase in borrowing costs, I think it's still more affordable today than renting. And you can control that. And I think that's why Canadians are, have such pride in home ownership.
Yeah.
And I think home ownership is part of the Canadian dream. So
there are people out there, though, there are exceptions, I guess, is what I'm getting at. And for some people, they don't want the liability or any of that. They just want to pay their rent, and that's fine, right?
And
it's
I
not for everybody.
I think that's easier. But the one thing that you don't get when you pay your rent is you don't get an asset that appreciates, and you don't have a debt that you're paying down. So I think if you're renting, that's cool too, but you need to put some money aside. The challenge is it's really hard to put as much money aside as it is to pay down a mortgage and to have the appreciation of a home. And obviously, home ownership comes with a risk. As we know, in Halifax, the average home price is around $500,000, which means the household income needs to be above $100,000 to qualify for that type of home.
Yeah.
And that is above our average household income in Nova Scotia. So typically, you need 2 borrowers to buy a home. And I think in the queer community, it's not always two people that are in a relationship. I have certainly seen many more applications that have 3 borrowers. That is becoming more normal.
Yep.
And I think with the cost of real estate, we're going to see that happening more and more. And are the 3 people in a relationship? I think sometimes they likely are.
Not all of them even have to live in the house.
No, certainly there certainly have been situations where there have been a couple and a co-signer.
Yeah.
There have been maybe 3 friends that buy a home together.
Yeah.
Maybe there's 3 people that are in a relationship together that are buying a home.
Sure.
That is acceptable. And honestly, it's more of the norm now than it ever used to be. When I started 18 years ago, if there were 2 men on an application, they asked what the relationship was. Legally, unless you are domestic partners in the province of Nova Scotia, we put single and single. And then I have another pull down that'll say, what's the relationship to each borrower? And I'll put couple. Yeah. And they'll still come back and ask. Yeah. But now, guess what? There's not as many questions about what the relationships are, because I think there's so many different scenarios out there. Lenders included are certainly becoming a lot more inclusive. And I think that has really kind of paved the way for, more people.
And it's good business for them, right? Obviously.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
It certainly is. And, for me, I think building, the community, and I think, buying a home, it's a great way to, support the community as well.
All right. So if people want to know more about Clinton Wilkins, what's the best way to do so? Because there's so many things to know about what you guys do.
Yeah. The first place to start is to check us out online at teamclinton.ca/radio. Lots of great information on there. Recently, we've hit now over 600 blog posts.
Nice.
And you can also find the link to our Pride and Homeownership Workshop. It is right there on the website.
Clinton, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. We'll do this next month.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
All right. That's Mortgage 101, your guide to home ownership with Clinton Wilkins and myself, Todd Veinotte. We'll see you next month.